At 12:30 this afternoon, the three most powerful Republicans in the country walked into the White House. Not the setup to an elaborate joke, although it kind of sounded like it the way that I said it right there. This actually happened. 12:30 this afternoon, the three most powerful Republicans in the country, John Boehner, Eric Cantor, Kevin McCarthy, they walked into the White House. They headed straight for the private dining room, and they met for about an hour with President Obama. Here's a sign of just how much things can change in Washington over the course of a few months. If this meeting had happened, say, right after the midterm elections, who do you think would have the upper hand? President Obama had just been handed an electoral drubbing at the hands of Republicans, a shellacking in his words. Republicans were feeling very, very mandatey about that.
Is that compromising?
I am not going to compromise on my principles, nor am I going to compromise the will of the American people.
I mean, first and foremost, we're not going to be willing to work with him on the expansive liberal agenda he's been about.
There will be no compromise on repealing Obamacare. There'll be no compromise on stopping Democrats from growing government and raising taxes. And if I haven't been clear enough yet, let me say again, no compromise.
No compromise. We are here to show the Democrats who's boss. At that time, essentially the morning after the midterm elections, President Obama was arguably at the lowest point of his presidency. Republicans were very much on the rise. The Beltway press was full of think pieces about how Mr. Obama would have to bend the will of the Republican Party going forward. If today's meeting had taken place, instead of today, if it had taken place on November 3rd, we might have expected the Republican leadership to walk into that meeting with an agenda that just said, we crushed you and here are our demands. But today is not November 3rd. And today, what happened is Republicans came out of that meeting and they sounded like this.
It was a very good lunch, and we're able to find enough common ground, I think, to show the American people that we're willing to work on their behalf and willing to do it together.
We looked at places that we could work together on.
We did have a fairly robust conversation about the need for all of us to work together.
What happened to all those no compromise guys from a couple of months ago? Those no compromise guys just shellacked themselves over on Capitol Hill. The Republicans in charge of the House have this week metaphorically punched themselves in the face so hard they hurt not just their face, but also their hand. But remember where this started. Day one of the new majority, House Republicans staged a reading of the Constitution on the House floor. Remember this? They read the Constitution on the House floor, except for the parts of it they did not like, and the parts of it that were on the pages that were stuck together in the three-ring binder they were reading it from. That same day, Republicans had to clean up their own self-inflicted constitutional crisis when two of their own members had to be re-sworn in because they missed the official swearing in. Turns out you can't become a member of Congress by raising your hand in front of a television, even though two of them tried. When the brand new majority made big promises to do everything through committees and with an open amendment process and all these other open rules, they didn't just break those promises once they got into the legislative session. They broke those promises with the very first bills they introduced. Then there was the promise that they would cut $100 billion from the budget this year. What they actually proposed is $68 billion short of that. Then we got the dueling State of the Union responses from two different Republican members of Congress. Then we've had the big message issue. No matter what Eric Cantor tweets about all of the House Republicans' efforts being focused on jobs, 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 Republicans instead have three different radical anti-abortion bills that they are moving on right now, two of which they have already had hearings on. And as their congressional leadership keeps gamely trying to get somebody to believe they are focusing on jobs, like they keep saying, the highest profile Republican members of the House keep going out and giving speeches like this.
Some would have us focus our energy on jobs and spending. But as you attest today by your presence, you know we must not remain silent when great moral battles are being waged. Let's start by denying all federal funding for abortion at home and abroad.
which is great if you're Mike Pence and you want to be president of anti-abortistan. But if you are Majority Leader Eric Cantor and your job is to get the American people to believe that all the Republicans in Washington care about are jobs, 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 all our efforts are centered around jobs, then Mike Pence and all these anti-abortion bills that your party is moving on, they are something other than great. And if the messaging here were not bad enough already, consider this. One of the three big anti-abortion bills that Republicans are pushing right now gets at the issue of how to ban abortion, how to make abortion less available by raising taxes. Republicans would raise taxes on your health insurance policy if your health insurance policy covers abortion. So it's a tax hike. Maybe you guys can run on that in 2012. This isn't just Republicans veering off message. This is Republicans lying in wait for the message, pouncing on it, beating it up, and stealing its lunch money. I mean, as you know, one of the earliest decisions of the Republican-controlled Congress is that they would take a week off for every 2 weeks that they went to work. This happens to be one of the weeks that they are working. It's a short week. They didn't work on Monday. But for the 4 days that they are working this week, Republicans scheduled exactly 5 things to do in the House. Just 5 things. Rename a federal courthouse. There's a South American trade deal they wanted to extend. There's something that's a U.S. out of the U.N., don't pay money to the U.N. that the U.N. is expecting from us bill that they wanted to pass. It's an idea they got from a website they set up. They also wanted to reauthorize certain provisions of the Patriot Act that are due to expire. And then they wanted to pass a resolution to remind committees of their responsibility to review regulations. That's the only one they actually wanted to debate this week. 10 hours of debate on whether or not they should pass a resolution to remind committees what committees do. This is not exactly heavy lifting. Republicans have a 49-seat majority in the House, and this is what they wanted to do with it this week. And so far, even with an agenda that looks like this is the legislative equivalent of a human having a to-do list that says wake up and then says go back to sleep. Even with a legislative agenda that ambitious, they have failed really badly. They did get the courthouse renamed, but everything else, no. That trade bill, they pulled it from the floor yesterday when it became clear Republicans did not have the votes to pass it. The U.S. out of the UN bill brought to the floor for a vote and then soundly defeated. The Patriot Act bill brought to the floor for a vote last night and then also soundly defeated. They brought it to the floor under special rules where it didn't have to go through a committee, it didn't get a full debate, and no amendments were allowed to be added to it. All things the Republicans went crazy criticizing Democrats for and that they said they wouldn't do. And even after doing it that way, it still lost. Not by a vote or two, but by 13 votes. Who's in charge of the counting? It should also be noted that this was not some organized Tea Party revolt against the Republican Party. Most of the Tea Party caucus members voted for passing the Patriot Act, including their headliners like Michelle Bachmann and Allen West. The dissenters that apparently completely blindsided the Republican leadership on this vote were rank-and-file, run-of-the-mill Republicans. The people whose votes you're supposed to be able to count in your sleep. Then, to add injury to insult, after they lost that vote, after they lost 3 votes in 24 hours, votes that they themselves scheduled, there has been the added spectacle of poor freshman Republicans, like a congressman named Todd Rokita of Indiana, going to the press to explain that they were totally in the dark about what it is they've been doing in Congress this week. Mr. Rokita told Politico.com today that he, quote, didn't know anything about the Patriot Act vote until today. Nevertheless, Mr. Rokita voted for it, only later admitting, quote, in a free society, you have to be very careful as to taking away the civil liberties of the American people. Well, thanks to the Republican leadership, Mr. Rokita says he didn't know anything about the Patriot Act vote until the day of the vote, and then he voted for it, and then he's telling the press that he didn't know anything about it when he cast the vote on it, even though he understands that civil liberties are a big deal. Was that a mistake? Should I not have done that? This guy is a freshman. This is the kind of thing, Mr. Rokita, that your leadership is supposed to protect you from.
Well, listen, we've been in a majority 4 weeks. We're not going to be perfect every day.
Republicans right now are not just off message, they are at war with themselves. They appear to be functionally leaderless. They appear to have no idea how to actually do the basic day-to-day work of running one of the branches of government. We should have had some idea that there was going to be a problem when they messed up swearing themselves in.